Welcome to Wandering Jews at J Squared Adventures. Travel far enough and you meet yourself.
We're your hosts. I'm Scott.
I'm Sorrel. Kibbutz Hefziba in the Jezreel Valley, not far from the Gilboa Mountain, 1928. Picture this. A group of young pioneers is out plowing the fields, and suddenly, the plow jolts to a stop. They've hit something hard. At first, it seems like just another rock. But as they dig, colors begin to emerge from the soil. Not stone, not rubble. An ornate mosaic floor, later identified as the floor of a 6th century synagogue.
Today, we know the site as the Beit Alpha synagogue. The name originates from the ancient Jewish settlement of Beit Ilfa, or maybe Ilfo, or maybe Aleph, which lived on the site as far back as 1400 years ago. This moment of discovery, the discovery of the Mosaic, is more than archaeology or pure academics. It's a recovering of another story in the centuries-long Jewish connection with the land of Israel. More than just history, its identity, its memory, and its rootedness.
In this episode of Wandering Jews, Scott and I are going to explore how the Beit Alpha mosaic challenges assumptions about Jewish art, reveals the meanings of Jewish indigenous identity, and even the place of archaeology in modern Israeli civil religion. The Beit Alpha synagogue mosaic is a tapestry laid in stone, a sacred floor that speaks in color, symbol, and story.
Now, picture yourself standing on a porch which wraps its way around the house that inside is the place of the mosaic floor. At the top of the mosaic, the tale of the binding of Isaac unfolds. Abraham, his knife raised, stands over his bound son Isaac. A fiery orb pierces the sky, and from it the hand of God reaches down, not in wrath, but in mercy. Abraham's hand is blocked, and Isaac lives to take his place among the fathers and mothers of the people of Israel.
At the center, the heavens turn. A radiant zodiac wheel spins with the seasons, and at its heart, Helios, Greek-Roman sun god, charges forward in his chariot. His golden pagan presence might surprise us today, yet here in the ancient synagogue, Helios is a visitor in this synagogue. He has a place. He sets a cosmic clock in divine time.
Below the image of the heavens and the sun god is the Torah Ark, flanked by menorahs and temple vessels. It reminds us that holiness lives not only in myth and stars, but in the quiet devotion of daily service and prayer.
The mosaic is not just decoration, it is a visual symphony where Jewish memory dances with pagan imagery, and the floor beneath your feet becomes a canvas of eternity. And it conjured the connection with Zion and Jerusalem and the temple destroyed by Rome, yet remembered as a source and destination for over 2,000 years in every corner of the Jewish dispersion.
And so the mosaic asks us, if you had to tell your own story in stone, our story in stone, what images would you choose? What would we want future archaeologists to uncover about our own times, our own lives, and our own communities?
So let's take our story to the early 1920s. The land of Israel was a place of both promise and hardship. The Third Aliyah, which began in the aftermath of World War I, and the Balfour Declaration brought approximately 35,000 Jewish immigrants, mostly young idealistic pioneers from Eastern Europe. Inspired by socialist and Zionist ideologies, they came ready to build a new society rooted in labor, agriculture, and national revival.
In this particular corner of the Jezreel Valley, many of the pioneers were members of a youth movement called Hashomer Hatzair, the Young Guard. Socialist Zionists, they were working towards the building of utopia, redeeming the land, and, as it was said, also redeeming themselves. They emphasized communal living, manual labor, cultural renewal. In 1922, a group of Hashomer Hatzair members from Galicia and Poland, they established Kibbutz Hefziba near the ancient site of Beit Alpha. The name Hefziba meaning, my delight is in her. Isaiah 62:4. It reflected their deep emotional and spiritual connection to the land. It's not just about farming. It's not just about settlement. It's a valley steeped in our own history, the backdrop of biblical battles and prophetic visions. And to settle here in the 1920s was to step, in their eyes, right into the middle of Jewish memory and to build the Jewish future.
So as lovely as that vision was, and as fertile as the land was, life was far from easy. The pioneers drained swamps, battled malaria, and built their kibbutz from scratch with their bare hands, living in tents and wooden huts, sharing resources and cultivating the land. Imagine you're 19 or 20 years old, far from home, exhausted, out of your depth, and yet you believe in it because you are part of something that is bigger than yourself.
1928. Digging irrigation channels, the young pioneers made a discovery that forever linked their modern return to the land with its ancient past. Underneath the soil, uncovering this mosaic floor, the Beit Alpha synagogue, Helios in his chariot, the drama of the Akedah, of the binding of Isaac. It was a visual story that had been buried, and because it was buried, survived for all millennia, waiting, seemingly, for the pioneers to return. For the members of Hefzibah, this tremendous discovery really affirmed all that their labor was about, all of their hard work. It wasn't just about building a future. It was about reclaiming a past. Their building was about returning home.
It's really quite emotional when you think about it. The pioneers are coming with this vision and they're very much future focused. And yet they're reclaiming their past in a very healthy, kind of wholesome way, connecting to their roots. And that mosaic became a symbol of continuity, a link between the past and future, like you said, Scott. It helped shape archaeology as a form of civil religion, a ritual of identity building that connected modern pioneers to the land that they were not only cultivating, but also essentially reclaiming.
And as you hinted, the physical conditions they were living in, the quality of the work that was demanded of them, the being far away from home, maybe this was a kind of spiritual gasoline, you know, the sense of having a bigger message, having a bigger mission. It
provided the fuel.
Exactly, providing the fuel that enabled them to push forward, to move forward, and to leave it to us so many years later. Yeah. Exactly.
One of the, when you think about what they uncovered, and it's essentially like representative art, right? That's depicted through imagery, through scenes, through biblical scenes with the Akedah, through animals. One of the biggest assumptions about Judaism takes us to the second commandment. It forbids making carved images for idol worship. And over time, many interpreted this as a rule against visual art in sacred contexts. During Second Temple times, this was largely true. Representational art was rare, almost unknown among Jews. The trauma of idolatry and foreign domination made communities understandably wary and hesitant to use images in that sacred context.
And famously, people who've been in Israel, you remember visiting Caesarea, visiting Masada, and seeing Herodian mosaics, which do not have any representational images. But you know what? Like most things, it's a little more complicated, because if we roll back the clock, earlier traditions, they do tell a more complex story. The Temple of Solomon, for example, we know from the Bible. Sculptural elements were present and divinely sanctioned. The cherubim, the winged angelic guardians of the ark, crafted from olive wood, overlaid with gold. 1 Kings chapter 6. The temple also featured the bronze sea, statuary of lions, oxen, palm trees. They were meant to be symbolic, not idolatrous, but these examples suggest that the prohibition was not against all images, but maybe, during the time of the Bible, it was against images that had specific idolatrous use.
So if we fast forward to late antiquity, the Beit Alpha mosaic featured zodiac wheels, Helios in his chariot, and personified seasons, alongside biblical scenes like the binding of Isaac. And these images, like you said, they weren't about worshipping other gods. They reflected a Jewish community expressing its identity through storytelling, right? Essentially, it's storytelling and connecting with a culture around them while staying firmly within the theological boundaries.
In the Beit Alpha Mosaic, it's not an isolated example. It shares a visual language with Byzantine church art and broader Greco-Roman artistic traditions. This includes the things we've spoken about: use of Mosaic motifs, solar deities, seasonal personifications. These are elements that we find not only in synagogues, but in Christian basilicas and large public buildings all across the Byzantine Mediterranean world.
In Beit Alpha, the central panel features Helios, the Greco-Roman sun god, riding his chariot across the sky, surrounded by the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 4 seasons. This arrangement is mirrored in other Jewish synagogues of the Byzantine period.
Like in Hamat Tiberia, 4th century CE, not so far from the time period and even the location of Beit Alpha. There again, our friend Helios appears in a central medallion with zodiac signs encircling him.
Kukok, 5th century CE, which includes Helios, zodiac signs, and seasonal personifications.
And many of us have been at Sipori, Sepphoris, 5th, 6th century CE, whose mosaic includes zodiac signs paired with Hebrew months and scenes of biblical hospitality. Listen, these motifs, they weren't unique to Jewish art. In Byzantine churches, similar signage, zodiac cycles, solar imagery, they were all used to express cosmic order and divine providence. And even in faraway Italy, the 12th century Otranto Cathedral in southern Italy features a massive zodiac mosaic on its floor, integrating Christian and classical symbols.
Mosaics from Astipaleia, Greece, depict both lunar and solar calendars, zodiac signs, and seasonal figures, sometimes replacing the 4 seasons with the 4 winds of heaven.
And even the binding of Isaac, obviously a clearly Jewish story in every single way, that central biblical scene in the Beit Alpha mosaic, it appears in Byzantine Christian art, most notably in the Basilica of San Vitale in Ravenna, 547 CE. Where Abraham is shown poised to sacrifice Isaac, halted by divine intervention, surrounded by lush imagery and golden halos.
All these parallels that we're describing suggest that Jewish artists and patrons in the lands of Israel in late antiquity, they weren't working in isolation. They were part of a shared Mediterranean artistic tradition, as well as a bold statement of Jewish distinctiveness. To be distinct from and to be part of, you can hold those two together. They're not necessarily contradictory statements.
Definitely. And the mosaic is something else. It's also kind of a declaration of rootedness. Hebrew inscriptions appear alongside Greco-Roman imagery. Biblical scenes, they seem to anchor Jewish memory in the land itself.
The synagogue's location in the Galilee speaks to continuity of Jewish life after the destruction of the temple. So it's not just decorative. We're looking at this mosaic. It's a spiritual map, a cosmic calendar, and a political statement. We've been here, sure, and we're still here, and we're going to be here.
And the 1928 discovery of the mosaic coincided with the rise of archaeology in pre-state Israel, the period of the Yishuv. Digging wasn't just seen as science. It was ritual. It was identity building.
It became a symbol. It was featured in textbooks, school trips, and cultural narratives. You know, you see kids kneeling on that mosaic floor. They're not just learning history. They were inheriting it. Archaeology became a kind of civil religion, sacred storytelling in a secular nationalist framework.
And let's bring it up to today. How many times does an Israeli radio or television news broadcast finish with sports, weather, and now a report on a recent archaeological find? A group of children somewhere near Jerusalem found a coin while digging in a field, etc., etc. Again, this sense of reconfirming, affirming, giving voice to the place of the Jewish people as an indigenous people in the land of Israel is part of the ongoing storytelling that we've created for ourselves. The story goes back to our writing of the Bible and continues up until today, and archaeology is a major part of that.
So talking of the story, we have the famous story of the Akedah.
Definitely. The Mosaic's description of the Akedah, it joins a century-long Jewish conversation about interpretation, about themes of sacrifice, of faith, of divine mercy. In the ancient Near East, child sacrifice was practiced very, very widely. The binding of Isaac is the first story that we know of.
The challenges
that rejects this. Isaac is saved. The ram is substituted. This is the covenantal moment where the first and one of the greatest revolutions of the Jewish people is first declared.
So we know that Christian theology actually later interprets this story of the binding of Isaac. So Jesus is a lamb sacrificed, fulfilling Isaac's role. And the Bet Alpha Mosaic essentially, as we said, asserts a Jewish counter-narrative. So Isaac is not sacrificed, Abram is blocked, and divine mercy prevails.
The premier Israeli philosopher, scientist, firebrand Yeshayahu Leibovitz called the Akedah the ultimate test of faith. This idea of obedience even beyond reason.
That was a trademark of his philosophy, right?
For sure, definitely. Aviva Zornberg,
I love her.
Unusually sensitive and very insightful contemporary scholar and interpreter. She explores the story kind of looking at its emotional depth, seeing Isaac as the way he's shaped by trauma, by silence, by the relationship with his physical father, with our divine father, one could say, and the encounter with the unknown.
Which is interesting because we explored the trauma that going back to ancient times that Jews felt when it came to idolatry and that kind of reluctance and hesitant to entertain the idea of images being anything but idolatrous. The Mosaic becomes midrash in stone, rejecting child sacrifice, affirming life, and asserting Jewish faith in a contested land. When we visit Beit Alpha or other ancient sites in Israel, we can reach out. We can touch the past. We can hear the voices of our ancestors in our ears. And we can ask ourselves, what stones will we carry forward to build our own tomorrows?
Next time you stand on a mosaic floor in Israel, or even look down at a sidewalk in your own city, remember, beneath your feet are stories waiting to be uncovered. If you excavated, what would be revealed? And what would you do with memories of forebears asking to hear, to share, and tell their stories? And how would you make those stories your own? And now, something for the road. A tip, a recommendation to help you make every journey your own.
Hi, my name is Sherry Robbins. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I've been living in Israel now for just over 40 years. And talking about Beit Alpha makes me think about the conservative synagogue that I grew up in Cleveland. And it was a very large conservative synagogue. And when I bring people to Beit Alpha, as with any site, what I try most to do is to help people find a connection to the site. So in thinking about my synagogue growing up, I ask other people to think about the synagogues that they've been to in the past, or maybe that they belong to now. And what does that synagogue look like? Ask people to describe what they look like. Is there a second story? And then eventually bring all of this to the 6th century synagogue at Beit Alpha, where I really do believe things don't change over time. Because when you look at the mosaic floor, you can imagine that at some point there was a committee meeting. And this committee gathered in order to talk about, they wanted to decorate the floor, what was going to be the design, what was going to be the architectural, just bigger picture of the synagogue, such as should there be a second story? What should that second story be used for? Some scholars say that Beit Alpha had a women's section upstairs. Other scholars say, no, that wasn't the case. So then if not, then what was up there? But the mosaic and the images of the mosaic, I always try to bring people into that committee room and the discussions that were going on. For example, hey, I heard about these two artisans that just did a synagogue floor up the road there at Sipori. Why don't we hire them? And somebody else would maybe say like, no, I don't think so. We shouldn't hire them. I heard that they didn't do really good work. And the arguments that would go back and forth over that. The design itself, once you finally decided on who was going to do the work, then what should be the images? Should there be language? Now, here at the Beit Alpha Synagogue, we know that we have Aramaic and we also have Greek. In the United States, there's the question of where's the Hebrew? Where's the English? If you look at the Bama, there's also the question of flags. Do you have the United States flag and the Israeli flag? Where do they sit? Are they next to each other? On the opposite sides of the Bima? All of these questions were discussed in the 6th century. Well, maybe not the American flag and Israeli flag issue, but all of these issues of where and how things should look in the 6th century and today as well. So if we look at the image of Beit Alpha, there was a discussion then of, in Aramaic and in Greek, to list the names of the workers. There was also a listing of who donated the money. Now, that one is always a big one. In the 21st century, 20th century, or back in the 6th century, if you donated the money, where are you going to see your name? On the back of a chair, next to the bathroom, up on the Bama. And Marianus and his son Hanina, that's what the Greek inscription says, they actually were the workers. So they had to obviously go to the committee and say, here, we have a couple of proposals for you. We suggest putting in a couple of menorahs. We suggest having an image of the sacrifice of Isaac. Well, that's really nice. Show us your designs. And somebody in the committee says, no, they don't look really lifelike. They look very childish. And if you look at the mosaic of Beit Alpha, indeed, the mosaic representation of the Akedah is rather simplistic, almost as if a child had drawn it. Somebody on that committee probably didn't like that. So there's questions about design, and there's questions also about architecture. And I think this kind of brings the possibility to make a connection to where you're standing in Beit Alpha in what was discovered by accident in the late 1920s. Just simply plowing a field and, what's that in the ground? Today being one of the best examples, in my opinion, of not only the binding of Isaac, but the question of the zodiac wheel. And boy, I am sure you can hear the arguing going on in the committee over that one. A zodiac wheel, that's not Jewish. Well, people up the street in Tiberias at Hamat Tiberia, they had a zodiac wheel. Why can't we have a zodiac wheel? In Sipori, there's one. These questions just all really bring me to come to the conclusion that it truly does not matter. 6th century or where we are now, it is possible to find your roots here in Israel while standing at a national park, because now it's protected by the national park. And to keep that in mind, that as you travel through the world and here in Israel, that we look forward to seeing you with J Squared at any of the tours that we offer. Come and find your connection, your roots.
Thanks for listening. Dive deeper into the world of travel on our J Squared Adventures website. That's j2adventures.com. And stay in the loop with our latest adventures on all our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all under J2 Adventures. And if you enjoyed hanging out with us, don't forget to leave us a comment, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, travel safely and keep wondering. I'm Sorrel.
I'm Scott.
See you soon with the Wandering Jews.